I also today we will be doing the open assessment from Scrum.org, and I will explain you the questions answers with examples and explanations. So I just click on this start now. Now it is going to open this assessment. So it has around 30 questions, and we have to answer in 30 minutes, and passing mark is 85%. So now I click on the continue. This is about the assessment introduction. If I click on the questions, now we have the questions. The question is, when does a developer become the sole owner of an item on the on the sprint backlog? So there are four options to this question. A, at the sprint planning event. B, during the daily scrum. C, never all sprint backlog items are owned by the developers on the scrum team. Option D is whenever a team member can accommodate more work. So in this case, the answer will be option C, because the items in the sprint backlog is owned by the entire development team. It is not the accountability of an individual developer. So you can see here that question is, when does a developer become? It's not about a single developer, it's the entire whole team. So in this case, the option will be C. Now click on the next question. Next question is, when does a developer become accountable for the value of a product backlog item selected for the sprint? Right. So this is again the similar question. So option A is whenever a team member can accommodate more work. Option B is at the sprint planning event. Option C is during the daily scrum, and option D is never. The entire scrum team is accountable for creating value every sprint. So again here the accountability is on the scrum entire scrum team. So in this case, uh, option D will be the appropriate answer. Question 3 is, which statement best describes a product owner's responsibility? So it is asking about the product owner's responsibility, right? So directing the developers, no, this is not true, because Scrum team is self-managed. Option B, optimizing the value of the work the Scrum team does. This seems to be right, but let's see option C and D also. Managing the project and ensuring that the work meets the commitment to the stakeholders. This is again responsibility of the Scrum developers. Keep stakeholders from distracting the developers. Yeah, this is true, but if you think from the weightage point of view, then option B is looking more, having more weightage. So we'll take this one. Next question. When multiple Scrum teams work together on the same product, right? Each team should maintain a separate product backlog. So it is asking about whether we should have one product backlog or multiple product backlog when there are multiple Scrum teams. So this is false actually, because a single product will have only one product backlog, right? And it can have different sprint backlog, but product backlog and product owner will be a single entity. So this is false. Next question. What is the main reason for the Scrum Master to be at the daily Scrum? So this is again very tricky question. To make sure every team member answers three questions. To gather status and progress information to report to management. They do not have to be there, they only need to ensure the developers have a daily Scrum. To write down any changes to the sprint backlog, including adding new items and tracking progress on the burndown. So if you see here, this option C is looking very prominent, because they are actually making sure the Scrum Master is actually ensuring that the team is actually understanding Scrum, and developers are actually meeting. So Scrum, daily Scrum is for developers, where it is mandatory for them to meet. But Scrum Master or product owner, they are not actually mandatory participant for the daily Scrum. So option C seems to be very appropriate here. Next question: when does a sprint conclude? It is asking about when actually a sprint is concluded. So when the sprint retrospective is complete, when all the tasks are complete, when the product owner decides enough has been done to meet the sprint goal, when all product backlog items meet their definition of done. So this is asking about the which Scrum, after which Scrum event the Scrum is concluded. So sprint retrospective is the last event after which the sprint is concluded, right? What is the typical size of for a Scrum team? So it is there are four options. So it would be 10 or fewer, right? This is actually this all question is coming from Scrum Guide 2020. So if you go on Scrum Guide 2020, you will be able to see the definition, how many people are there. Next question: who creates the definition of done? So definition of done is actually to make sure that whenever an increment is created, that is meeting the definition of done, right? So product owner, option A is product owner, since they are responsible for the product's success. Yeah, they are responsible for the product success, but they are not actually the one who will create the definition of done. Option B is the Scrum Master, since they are responsible for the productivity of the developers. This is also not true. Scrum Master is not actually responsible for the productivity of the developer. They actually help them to become more and more productive, but they actually not create the definition of done. It is an organizational, if it is option C is, if it is not an organizational standard, the Scrum team must create a definition of done appropriate for the product. So here answer is Scrum team must create a definition of done when there is no organizational standard. So if there is some organizational standard for definition of done, that can be used by the Scrum team. But if it is not, then it will be created by the Scrum team, right? Option D is also fine, but option C looking more appropriate. Next question: the three pillar of empiricism are. So this is pretty straightforward: inspection, transparency, and adaptation. So in inspection, actually, product artifacts are getting inspected, right? And artifacts are kept transparent. And if there is some output, some suggestion from the inspection, then that is getting adapted. So this is empiricism actually, the pillars of empiricism. Next question is, who has the final say on the order of the product backlog? So order of the product backlog, it is always ordered by the product owner. So here option D. Okay. Next question is, what is the function or purpose of management? So management is actually responsible for supporting the product owner with insights and information into high value product and system capabilities. And management is also responsible for supporting the Scrum Master to encourage organizational change that fosters empiricism, self management, bottom up intelligence, and intelligent product delivery. So, all this seems to be very appropriate, right? Monitoring is not related, is not the direct work of the management, and identifying and reviewing people itself is a responsible for the Scrum team, and monitoring progress also is the responsibility of the developers. So option A in this case is the right answer. Next question is, when might a sprint be abnormally cancelled? So sometimes product owner can cancel the sprint if the sprint goals are obsolete, right? So let's see which option is best fit for this when the sprint goal becomes obsolete. So this seems to be very correct. All others are not that accurate. You can just go through it. Question 13, the length of a sprint should be. So it should be 1 month or less, right? And rest of the options are also looking good. Short enough to keep the business risk acceptable to the product owner. So the sprint should be short enough. So if the Scrum team foresee any risk, then they can actually communicate to the product owner. So this is also seems correct. Option B, short enough to be able to synchronize the development work with other business events. This also seems to be correct. So both option A, B, and C seems correct. So in this case, option D will be the answer. Next, the time box for a daily scrum. So daily scrum is always 15 minutes. So just give this answer 15 minutes. Next, the developers should not be interrupted during the sprint and the sprint goal should remain intact. These are conditions that fosters creativity, quality, and productivity. Which one of the following answer is false? Right. So as a decomposition of the selected product backlog item, the sprint backlog changes and may grow as the work emerges. This is true because when the task is broken down, the sprint backlog may changes and it may grow. So this is correct. This is not false. This is true. The product owner can help clarify or optimize the sprint when asked by the developers. This is also true. Developers can ask with the product owner for some clarity, right? So this is true. The developers may work with the product owner to add or remove work if they find themselves with a more or less capacity than expected. This is also true. They can negotiate with the product owner to optimize some of the product backlog items. Option D, the sprint backlog is fully formulated in the sprint planning event and does not change during the sprint. This is false. Actually, backlog, the Scrum developers are the owners of the sprint backlog, right? So they can add additional task also. They can remove task also. So it is not fixed, right? So it can change. So in this does not change. It is saying it does not change during the sprint, but it can change during the sprint. So option D will be the right answer. Next question: who is required to attend the daily scrum? So daily scrum is for developers. So this is the answer, developers. It is there are so many options that can confuse it. Developers, product owner is not required. He is optional. Scrum Master and Product Owner, they are optional. Scrum team, it consists of all Scrum Master, Product Owner, and developers. So this will also not happen. The developers and Scrum Master, no, Scrum Master is not required. It is optional. Then option E, the developers. Next question: when does the next sprint begin? So this is question about when the next sprint will start. So immediately following the next sprint planning, immediately after the conclusion of the previous sprint. So after the sprint retrospective, the sprint is concluded and the next sprint begin. So option B is the right answer. Next, the Scrum team must choose at least one high priority process improvement item identified during the sprint retrospective and place it in the sprint backlog. This was true before the Scrum Guide 2020, but in Scrum Guide 2020, it was decided that it is too much of specific detail, right? So they make it optional. So option it should be false. Question 19: Why is the daily scrum held at the same time and same place? So in this case, it should be to make the scrum event, daily scrum event consistent, right? So option C will be the correct answer. The consistency reduces complexity. Next, option 20. The developer should have all the skills needed to do all the work, development work, except for specialized testing. This is not false. This is not true. Complete the project as estimated when the date and cost are committed. Turn the product backlog items they select into an increment of useful and valuable product functionality. So this is the main skill required by the developers. They should be able to turn the product backlog item they select into an increment of useful and valuable product functionality. Question 21. The product backlog is ordered by, it is always ordered uh, by uh, whatever is deemed most appropriate by the product owner. So product owner can can actually order the backlog item maybe on the priority risk, right? So those are the factors, but actually product owner is responsible for ordering. So whatever is deemed most appropriate by the product owner, he will be actually ordering. Okay. Next, an organization has decided to adopt Scrum, but management wants to change the terminology to fit with the terminology already used. What will likely happen if this is done? So it is asking that an organization is trying to adapt Scrum, but some changes. But it is not recommended to make the changes, right? Because then entire Scrum benefit cannot be achieved. So let's say go through the options. Without a new vocabulary as a reminder of the change, very little changes may actually happen. The organization may not understand what has changed with Scrum, and the benefits of Scrum may be lost. Management may feel less anxious. All of the above. So all of the above seems um, accurate, right? Because it is not recommended to change Scrum terminology. Question number 23. Which of the following are examples of Scrum team practicing Scrum poorly or not exhibiting traits of a self-managing Scrum team? So it is asking about which practice is not correct. The developers are collaboratively selecting their own work during the sprint. This is correct because developer will actually pick the work. The developers are working within the boundaries of their organizational functional description and nicely handling of work from analyst to developer to tester to integration. So this seems to be wrong because actually there is no specific role called analyst, developer, tester. They are all Scrum developers. Stakeholders attend the daily Scrum to check on the Scrum team's progress. This is also a wrong practice because nobody is actually tracking the progress of the Scrum developers. They are actually self managed, self disciplined. The developers have all the skills they need to create a valuable, useful increment. This is correct. The developers create their own sprint backlog, reflecting all work that is required to meet the definition of done. This is also correct. The developers invite external stakeholders to sprint planning to ask them how to turn a product backlog item into an increment via a complete and detailed sprint backlog. This also seems incorrect because they can invite external stakeholders to take some advice on any specific product backlog details, but they were not actually asked to create the backlog, right? They will actually Scrum developers will decide. Upon what type of process control is Scrum based? So it is a empirical process. Okay. Question 5. What are two ways a Scrum Master serves to enable effective Scrum teams? Right. So Scrum, it is asking about the roles and responsibility of the Scrum Master. So by starting and ending the meeting at the proper time. Yeah, this is fine. But let's see other option. By facilitating developers decision making. So actually they will facilitate developer decision making by keeping high value features high in product backlog. No, this is the responsibility of the product owner. By removing impediments that hinder the Scrum team. So this is also looking very appropriate. So these are the two best answer. They will be facilitating the developers for decision making, and they will be removing if there is any impedance. So these are the two key roles of the Scrum Master. Next question. This is little slow. Site sometimes goes slow. Yeah, the CEO asked the developers to add a very important item to a sprint that is in progress. What should the developers do? So it is asking about the CEO has told the developers to add a very important item to a sprint. In this case, what the developers do? So option A, add the item to the current sprint without any adjustment. This is not a good practice. Inform the other members of the Scrum team so the team can decide what to do. Add the item to the current sprint and drop an equal item of equal size. Add them into the next sprint. So he will actually inform the Scrum team. He will inform the product owner, right? That this is a situation that CEO has asked to add an increment. Then maybe product owner can discuss with the CEO and act accordingly. So again, responsibility goes to the product owner. If there is any item that has to be removed or has to be added, then the responsibility goes to the product owner. So actually, the Scrum developers are delegating this to the uh, product owner indirectly. Next question. What does it mean to say that an event has a time box? So it is a maximum time, right? The event must have at a set time. The event must take at least a minimum amount of time. The event must have happen by a given time. The event can take no more than a maximum amount of time. This is time box. So if the daily scrum is 15 minutes, then it should not be stretched beyond that. Question number 28. Who should know the most about the progress towards the business objective or release and be able to explain the alternatives most clearly? So it is asking about the roles and responsibility of the product owner because he is the one who is actually monitoring the whether the we are on track or not, we are able to meet the business objective or not, or if we are able to release the increment or not. Okay. Question number 29. Who is on the Scrum team? So there are basically three accountabilities: the product owner, the Scrum Master, the developers. Project manager is not a role in Scrum. Okay. And now we'll go to the last question. Scrum has a role called project manager. So there is no role called project manager in Scrum. Now we will click finish and we'll see if there is any answer wrong. Yeah, so all the question we answered correctly. So this is very important actually if you want to, basically uh, understand the Scrum and if you are going to participate for the certification, in that case it is very helpful. So that's it. We'll again come up with some other useful video. Thank you very much.